All right, Shalom. I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rakah Kwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. Judah came on ships, the West African origin of the true Israelites, all right, dealing with the southern kingdom, the house of Judah, okay? And what pretty much inspired this lesson was this video here I saw early on. It was posted by the brother, I believe his name is Manatazak, out of the GMS Los Angeles camp. His channel is GMS Get This Work Too. And this video is entitled Land of the Jews, 1588 Map of Africa, Congo. All right, so when I saw this video, I started looking up information going into, the captivity of the Southern Kingdom and how we were scattered again into the western part of Africa. All right, and this is a 1700s map, which that region of West Africa was known as Negroland. All right, and this was due to the scattering of the Southern Kingdom. All right, the House of Judah after Roman persecution, 70 A.D. All right, so Lord willing, I'm not too all over the place, but I just want to, just hit a couple facts and, make the point. This is the book of Baruch, chapter 2, and verse 29, and it reads, "If you will not hear my voice, surely this very great multitude shall be turned into a small number among the nations where I will scatter them." You see? "For I knew that they would not hear me, because it is a stiff-necked people. But in the land of their captivities, they shall remember themselves," right? So in this captivity in America, Babylon the Great is the only captivity where we lost our identity of who we are, pursuing the prophecy, right? Jeremiah 17:4. Let me get that real quick, and we'll come back to this, right? Jeremiah 17 in verse 4. Let me pull that up. All right, this is Jeremiah 17 in verse 4. And it reads, "And thou even thyself shall discontinue from thy heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thy enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For you have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever," which is a long period of time. This is what happened. Okay, this is the captivity where we lost our nationality, our heritage. It was beaten out of us. All right, we were called by another name. All right, these things happen, right? Let's go back to Baruch, the second chapter. Okay. Why is it not pulling back up? Hold on one second. Let me go back to that. All right, this is back in Baruch, chapter 2, and verse 30 again. Baruch 2 and 30. "For I knew that they would not hear me, because it is a stiff-necked people. But in the land of their captivities they shall remember themselves, and shall know that I am the Lord, Yahweh Shem Shai, their power. For I will give them a heart and ears to hear." And the Lord did that by giving us the breath back. Isaiah 44, Ezekiel 37. Okay, Revelation 11 and verse 11. All right, the Spirit of the Lord entered back into them, right? And great fear fell upon them which saw them. Okay, verse 32. "And they shall praise me in the land of their captivity, and think upon my name." All right, so we're praising the Lord in this final captivity. Okay, right here in America, Babylon the Great. All right, and wherever else the elect have been scattered in this time. Right? It says, in return from the stiff neck and from their wicked deeds, for they shall remember the way of their fathers which sinned before the Lord, Yahweh Shem Shai. You see? So I'm going to read this, and I actually have a copy, a couple of screenshots from this book here, "The Negroes and the Jews" by Lenora E. Burson, right? This is page 212. It says, Negroes claim to be Jewish is legitimate. The land of Israel is located in Western Asia, which they call the so-called Middle East. All right? The land of Israel is located in Western Asia and borders on North Africa. All the native inhabitants of that region were non-white. When Spain expelled its Jews in 1492, many of them went to Africa. It seems probable that some of them were brought later to America as slaves. The spirituals never sing of African rivers is always the Jordan or the Red Sea. They don't sing about African chiefs or kings. It's David or Moses or some other Jewish characters from the Bible. There you go, man. Right? Things that we already know.
An area that was alongside the Niger River. And if you actually look at ancient maps in 1736 and ancient maps in 1747 of Africa, you'll find a country called Negroland and the Kingdom of Judah. This is of utmost importance for us to understand how Yahweh is gathering the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. Because what actually happened is in this Gulf of Guinea in Western Africa, European slave ship holders, they were Ashkenazi slavers. They were of European origin. They were Western Mongols that had infiltrated Britain and mainly Portugal. They were the Ashkenazi slavers. They were wealthy merchant slavers that went down to the coast of Guinea. They employed Mohammedan trappers, Islamics, to go into the Kingdom of Judah and Negroland and take the royal house of Judah captive in slave ships, as it's recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, and bring them over to America, and they became known today as what? African Americans.
Man, it's all coming out. All right? Real quick. 2 Ezra 6 and 27. For evil should be put out, and deceit should be quenched. As for faith, it shall flourish. Corruption shall be overcome. And the truth, which have been so long without fruit, shall be declared, man. So there's no way around this thing, man. Okay, we are at the end where everything that has been hidden, should come to light. All right. So that's why, like I said, not to be all over the place, but yeah, the facts are overwhelming. Okay, it's just too heavy, right? Jeremiah chapter 14 and verse 2. It says, Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. All right, going into the fact of Judah is in a low position. All right, being worn down by the curses, no leadership, because Judah caught hell the most. All right, Judah going back to the head tribe. Okay, the southern kingdom. Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They are black unto the ground, and the cry of Jerusalem is going up. Right, Scripture said that Judah is black unto the ground. Let's pull that word black. That Hebrew word is quadar. Okay, quadar, to be dark, right? Dark colored. Let's see what the lexicon says, right? It says to be of a dirty blackish color, as of sunburnt skin. All right, so hold on. So when Esau gets sunburned, all right, he doesn't turn black. He doesn't turn of a dark color. He turns red, even more red. Okay, so how can this apply to them damn tiny tops and small hats, man? All right, Judah would be black, dark skin. All right, let me get one more. All right, he would be like the color of the soil, the earth. Right? Was it Songs of Solomon? Songs of Solomon. 1 and 5. Let me pull that up. Okay. Songs of Solomon 1 and 5. I am black, but comely, O you daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. All right. So King Solomon was letting you know that he was dark skinned, so-called black, NLT. I am dark but beautiful, O women of Jerusalem. dark as the tents of Kedar, dark as the curtains of Solomon's tents. All right, so the house of Judah would be of dark skin. They were black, so called. Okay, here's another one. Job. All the scriptures dealing with the color. Job 30:30. Job said, "My skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat." All right, there you go. So let's go back to what we had up here earlier. Okay, Judah came on ships, the West African origin of the true Israelites. Right, transatlantic slave trade. All right, just coming across a couple of websites as I was looking around, and I thought this one was pretty good here. Let's go down. All right. And it says, and they posted Isaiah 22:17. Let me make this a little bigger. All right. Isaiah 22:17. Behold, the Lord, Yahweh Shemel will carry thee away with a mighty captivity and will surely cover thee. Right. And that mighty captivity, when we were brought over here, to the Americas, really being scattered to the four corners of the earth, the transatlantic slave trade, right? The trans-Saharan slave trade, okay, which we know I've done lessons going into the millions of our people that were shipped across the world that died, all right, during those journeys. Verse 18, he will surely violently turn and toss thee like a ball in a large country, right? That's Jake being in those slave ships, man. All right, traveling across the earth, across the ocean, being packed in them in those slave ships, man. It says, there shalt thou die, and there the chariots of thy glory shall be the shame of thy Lord's house. And I will drive thee from thy station, and from thy state shall he pull thee down. You see that? So this is what happened. All right. Tying Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. All right, that we would be, let's just get that real quick, because he made mention in that clip, that Edomite, Deuteronomy 28:68. And it reads, it says, "And the Lord, Yahweh Shemel shall bring thee into Egypt again." All right, we're in New Egypt, okay? Spiritual Egypt, America, all right, which is known as Babylon the Great, right? This American captivity, this final captivity, okay? And it says, Deuteronomy 28:68, "And the Lord, Yahweh Shemel shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there you should be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." This is why, as I pulled this out before, okay, this slaves map, the selling of the slaves, all right, which was originally Hebos, which is a corruption of the word Hebrew, and they changed it to Negroes, all right, showing you that we are the biblical Hebrew Israelites, man, all right, and we would be sold amongst our enemies as slave men, slave women, and no man shall buy you. No man would redeem you from this captivity that the Lord put us in, man. Let's see what else we got. And this website is animaframework.com. Okay. Yeah, the curses we just read, Deuteronomy 28:68, Jeremiah 17:4, Isaiah 1:3, the ox know of his owners, the ox know of his owner, and the ass his master's crib, but Israel doeth not know, my people doeth not consider. All right, so this is all prophecy. Like he said, this is a prophetic reality confirmed by scripture, history, and spirit. The so-called African Americans, West Indians, and descendants of West African slaves in the Americas are the children of Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel. This is Yahweh's truth. Whether the heathen scoff or 2/3 reject it, it remains unmovable. All right. Okay, let's play this real quick before we go on here. All right.
So there's a new book I'm reading, Tiny Hats Selling the Slaves. Oh yeah, they forgot to mention all of this in the Rockefeller schools. And people say that's not true. Well, you should read this one. This guy was a rabbi who wrote this one. And you know the term layaway? That came from when rabbis were selling slaves. Yes. And this has pages and pages of all the auctions and the rabbis selling the slaves. Check this. Jacob Cohen, okay, owned a plantation. Yes, all the plantations were ran by the Tiny Hats. 294 enslaved Africans. He was the president of the synagogue. You can just look this stuff up. And what got even deeper is I found Charleston, 1825. That was the original place of the slave marts. And they own the merchants, they own the ships, they own everything. And look at this. Charleston, Tiny Hat, slave traders. Now, since the Tiny Hats own all the newspapers, if they tried to run away, they'd put an ad up trying to get the slaves back. Then it got deeper when I found out that the Tiny Hats owned the police too. So if people tried to run away, they owned both sides. And it's wild because there was only 2 people who actually spoke up about this. That's why it's hidden from you. And also when Christopher Columbus came over here, now you understand who Christopher Columbus was. And this is why the Tiny Hats, the Charzarians, had been kicked out of all these countries. Now you start to understand.
Now you start to understand. All right, too much information. All right, small hats were behind the funding of the slave trade. They own the slave plantations. All this stuff that we've been talking about and bringing out. All right. Anyway, let's go back. All right, it goes into the curses. Deuteronomy 28. Historical proof right here. Judah and West Africa. Okay. It says after the destruction of the second temple in 70 AD, Israelites fled Roman persecution and migrated down into Egypt and Sudan, into Niger, Mali, Ghana, and the Yoruba regions, establishing thriving Hebrew-speaking communities throughout West and Central Africa. Even European colonists recorded their shock. Many of the slaves came from the Kingdom of Judah. Portuguese records referring to the slave coast, which is also known as the Gold Coast, all right, on this map of the Negroland. All right, this is where the Europeans, all right, made millions, all right, off the backs of our people, the slaves, you know, these heathen nations, all right, they made a lot of money, all right, from enslaving our people, all right. Going back, the term Gulf of the Jews described coastal Angola where Israelites lived in exile. The Igbo and Ashanti peoples retained Hebrew customs, circumcision on the 8th day, kosher dietary laws, Sabbath observance, right? As I brought out, because I had lost the screenshot, but just pulling this up from the site that I screenshotted it from. It says medieval African maps written in the 17th century by the conquering Europeans, all right, the Edomites. When Europe took over Africa, they outlined the territory for 2 kings, King Louis of France and King Joseph of Britain. These maps are called the Danville and Emmanuel Bowen maps of 1747, which you get this image here, you know, of the slave auctions, okay, slaves for sale, right, from Hebrews to Negroes, right? It says, number 2, African map called Negroland, and the adjacent countries, also Upper Guinea, showing the principal European settlements in West Africa. In these maps, you will see geographical locations of Hebrew cities and kingdoms that were later taken into slavery. Sources outside the Bible prove who the Hebrews are. Slave Coast were Hebrew names before Europeans renamed it. All right, that's it. Slave Coast were Hebrew names. Slave Coast were Hebrew names before Europeans renamed it. On the map, you see Negroland above Guinea. So Uda and Sudan, now called Sudan, so the land of Uda, Judah. It says several African slave ships that came from a place called the Kingdom of Judah, Benin. Benin was where the slaves were sold, called Oda, which is French for Judah. The place where it is called a door of no return. All right, you have something called the port of Judah. All right, let me see if I got it pulled up here. Right, you got the port of Judah. Where we at? All right, the infamous Judah Odia slave port in Benin, West Africa, where millions, from which millions of so-called African slaves, Israelite slaves, were scattered to the four corners of the earth, man. So you could look into all of this stuff. All right. But again, as we read that in 2nd Ezra 6 and 28, man, this truth is flourishing, man. Okay. Which have been so long without fruit shall be declared. Right. Let's get a little bit more. All right. Let's see what else we got. Transatlantic slave trade, Deuteronomy 28 and 68. No other captivity in biblical history involved transportation via ships. Babylonian and Assyrian captivities were over land. Only one event in human history matches this prophecy: the mass shipments of millions of West African Israelites to the Americas between 1492 and the 1800s. They were stripped of their names, forbidden to speak their language, given false gods, and reduced to a status lower than cattle. This is exactly what Yahweh warned. There you should be sold unto your enemies. Not fellow citizens, not displaced neighbors, but enemies. All right. The name Judah never left. You just didn't know. Even in captivity, the name Judah followed us as Wida Oda, a slave port named after Yehuda, Kingdom of Judah, recorded in the 18th century. Maps on the West African coast. Jewish tribes in Timbuktu, documented by Arab historians. The Gulf of Guinea, renamed by Europeans, once called the Gulf of the Jews. The so-called slaves were not just Africans. They were Hebrew Israelites, and the elite knew it, man. There you go. Man, some good stuff on here. The truth, it says, the truth shatters the fake 1948 identity of Edom and Amalek, right? Let me make a point on that, right? So let's go here. I actually have this book in front of me right now, and I want to make the point on page 4. But this book is entitled The Roman Empire, The Empire of the Edomite by William Beeston, right? Originally published 1858. Check that out. Okay, the Roman Empire, the Empire of the Edomite. So let's go to the point. I have it highlighted here. Okay. So it says here, whence came the Romans may have been returned and even registered in writing before the birth of Yahushai, that the response proceeded neither from Greek nor Roman, but the despised JOO. That it has been preserved to us in the Jewish Targums that exist amidst the fables and impieties, the absurdities and the blasphemies of the Jewish Talmud, and that it may be comprehended in these 20 words. The Romans came from Esau. The Romans came from Esau, who is Edom, and Italy is the Idumea. Rome, the Basra of the Hebrew prophets, right? The descendants of Esau, say the Jewish rabbis or rabbins, the sworn enemies of the descendants of Jacob, even to the end of the world, right? The scriptures say we would have war with Amalek from generation to generation. It says, the sworn enemies of the descendants of Jacob, even to the end of the world, were at first a small nation inhabiting Mount Seir and the adjacent country contiguous to the land of Canaan. They were easily confined within their own limits, so long as the Israelites enjoyed a great and formidable empire in Canaan. But after the powerful republic of the 12 tribes had been destroyed by the Assyrians and Babylonians, they wonderfully increased in numbers and in strength, extended their dominion in the west, subjugated Italy, founded Rome and the Roman Empire, and at length entirely overturned the Jewish state, the second temple being destroyed by Titus Vespasian, and professing the religion of Yahushua HaMashiach, which they were the first of all nations to embrace. They hold Jacob in captivity to the Messiah, son of David, shall appear. That's heavy, man. All right, so these devils, all right, they know that they're gonna hold us in captivity until the Messiah appears. right? This is why we're at the end of his captivity. I mean, we're at the end of his world, which is the end of our captivity, man. Right? It says the rabbins further assert that the prophecies of the prophets against Esau, Edom, and the cities of Edom has of yet received but a partial accomplishment, and that they will obtain they will obtain their fulfillment in the punishment and destruction of Rome Christian. Right? This is why these Amalekites, they tie the West in America to Esau. All right, Western Christianity to Edom, because they know who they are. Right? It says they designate the eternal city in pious Rome. They dominate. It says how you say that word? Denominate her empire, the impious kingdom or kingdom of impiety, and they believe that the son of David will not come until this impious kingdom shall have been extended over the whole world. Such is the tradition of the rabbis or rabbins, and papal of Rome has done her utmost to suppress it, but without success. The two citations following will be sufficient for our present purpose, right? So yeah, that's the point. Okay? Yeah, that's the point I wanted. So let me get real fast, because hey, like I keep saying, it's all coming out. All right? Esau has been sought up. All right, Lamentations 4:21, it says, rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwellest in the land of Uz. And you can tie this back to America. The cup also shall pass through unto thee, thou shalt be drunken, and shall make thyself naked. All right, the Most High is exposing these Edomites, man. The punishment of thy iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. He will no more carry thee away into captivity. He will visit thine iniquity, O daughter of Edom. He will discover thy sins. So this is heavy, how it said that they were going to hold us into captivity until the son of David shall appear. Right? Professing, right? What did it say? They hold Jacob in captivity until Messiah, son of David, shall appear. This is what the Edomites are doing. They have the Israelites in captivity to this day. Jeremiah 50:33. Thus saith the Lord, Yahweh Shemir Washai of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together. All right, the northern and southern kingdom. All right, the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American, Hispanic. All right, we're in captivity together. We're not free yet. And all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. You see that? So this is what these Amalekites are talking about. All right, they know who they have in captivity. All right, now you start to understand. All right, they were heavily involved in the slave trade, man. No way around that. You see? So let's grab a little bit more. That might be it, though. All right. Yeah, that's the point, man. So you can check out this page. You know, it's a good page right here. Good information. But yeah, that's pretty much the point, man. Like I said, you know, this video here inspired the lesson. Let me go back to it. All right, and we'll wrap it up on there. Right.
The humiliation and violence inflicted on black Americans was mirrored in Africa. At the end of the 19th century, as Europe's powers scrambled for control of the continent's riches, the rights of the indigenous peoples were no impediment to their plans for conquest.
The attitude of white people in all Europe was tabula rasa, terra incognita. Here is a place which is a sort of no man's land, and in other words, we can create our own states there, and we're going to bring order and civilize them. Always the word civilize was used, whatever you were actually doing, whether you were shooting them, you were civilizing them. The vast majority of people thought they would need, at best, a paternalistic treatment, that they would need looking after, like children.
After the Conference of Berlin in 1885, Europeans embarked on a continent-wide land grab. In less than 20 years, 90% of African territory would be placed under European colonial rule. One of the main beneficiaries was was King Leopold II of Belgium. Aware of the vast fortune to be made, he persuaded Europe's powers to recognize his sovereignty over one of Africa's largest regions, the Congo.
Here was this man who became King of Belgium in 1865 at the age of 30. Enormously shrewd, enormously greedy, enormously ambitious, and with an absolutely brilliant sense of public relations. He hired the explorer Henry Morton Stanley, the man who found Livingstone, to go to the Congo and essentially stake out this huge territory for him. Leopold got first the United States and then all the major nations of Western Europe to ratify his seizure of this enormous territory in the center of the continent.
First, Leopold created a smokescreen, claiming that he wished to educate a savage people.
They were all really fooled by Leopold because they took him at his word. They thought he was a man who's going to lose all his money in this crazy philanthropic venture. But they didn't realize what he was really after at all, which was to make himself hugely rich by exploiting brown hands and broad backs who were going to carry the wealth of Africa and load it on ships for his own personal profit.
What it says on this 1588 map, the year 1588, Africa Tablia. Let's scroll down to where that would be. So here we have, let's point out some of the areas here. This is written in Latin, as you can see, by the way. So here we see the Jalufa, the land of the Jalus or the Walus. We have Guinea. We have Benin, and this is in Latin, Benin's reign, or their kingdom of Benin. But now let's go over to this area that was called Darnuba, right in this area here. And here we have this area, notice this, friends, written in Latin, Juderum Terra. So, what does this mean? Let's translate that. Look what it says. There's the Latin, there's the English.
There you go. The land of the Jews. All right. They knew who was over there. All right. There you have it. Negroland and the regions of West Africa. All right. Ghana, Nigeria. All right. Sierra Leone. Okay. Guinea. All right. All those areas, bro. See? But yeah, that's the point, man. I just wanted to, just add on to that. Lower Willing, I went to all over the place. But yeah. Shalom.